It was Dr. Johnson who said that it didn't matter where you dined as long as you breakfasted in Scotland, and that's just what I'm about to do.
It's August 1981, and Derek Cooper, the founding presenter of this programme, is north of the border, and he's hungry.
There's not one dish which is more peculiar to Scotland than porridge. That's good. Cold milk, hot salty oatmeal, and to follow a plate of Ayrshire bacon. To my mind, the best in the world.
Back then, Derek had gone in search of Scotland's larder, along with the people and landscapes behind the food. His own family roots lay in the Hebrides and the Isle of Skye, and throughout his career as a food journalist, he returned to Scotland again and again to share stories of things he believed should be treasured.
If you were compiling a list of the really outstanding ingredients of a good meal in Scotland, certainly the subtly cured Ayrshire bacon would be there. What else? Well, Aberdeen Angus beef, Orkney beef, North Ronaldsay lamb, Pentland potatoes, raspberries from Blairgowrie, finnan haddock, Arbroath smokies, salmon, again, best in the world, grouse, none finer than from Scottish moors, venison, Lochfine kippers, crabs, lobsters. Really, the Scots kitchen is incomparable.
But in 1981, Derek's visit also became a record of rapid change and loss.
For some years now, the Scottish Tourist Board has been campaigning to keep the heritage of Scottish cooking alive, a difficult assignment. The Scots are, if anything, even more fond of packets and tins than the English, and the joys of processed food have been seized on by Scottish hoteliers.
So much has happened to the foods Derek listed 45 years ago, and also to the landscapes they came from. How they've changed and evolved, and where their future might lie, is the subject of this programme. And we'll be exploring those questions through the ideas and experiences of one person, because for the past decade, they've been the very questions chef and author Pam Brunton has been asking herself.
So we're sitting outside our restaurant, Inver, on the wild west coast of Scotland, right on the shores of Loch Fyne. We're looking out over Lachlan Bay. The tide has just gone out and the evening light is just settling over the water with a nice milky glassy sheen hitting off the 15th century castle opposite me. There's cockles in the bay, mackerel further out, seaweeds on the shoreline, meadowsweet in front of us there, all of which feature on the menu at some point during the year.
And the vision with which Pam set up Inver, along with her partner Rob, is, I'm sure, one that would have lifted the spirits of Derek Cooper.
We knew we were opening a small restaurant that would be focused on craft and skill and traditional recipes, but with a kind of modern sensibility, because I've spent some years, the best part of a decade, working in some interesting kitchens around the world. And we wanted to bring some of that sensibility back to Scotland and its excellent larder, and to kind of continue the story of Scottish food, because we have such a great traditions in this country that had been, at the time, somewhat neglected. We have, I hope, revived a lot of interest, helped revive a lot of interest in Scottish food history and culture.
And then came a conversation that forced Pam to question the mission she'd set for her restaurant.
So at the far shores of the loch, you can see there's a couple of small villages, Minard and Furness. And in the very early days of the restaurant, we had a virtually empty dining room. And as the brand new owner, I was picking up the phone to answer one evening, and a voice said, "Hello, we're your neighbour. We're watching you from across the loch. We see your lights on at night, and we're wondering what kind of food is it you do?" And you take a deep breath and you go, "Well, OK, so modern Scottish food." And he goes, "Well, what's that then?" And at that point you're kind of like, "Oh, bloody hell, I don't know. What is that then?" So I'm reeling off these things from the specials board, and they all sound to me like very typically Scottish flavour combinations and ingredients. You've got lamb and barley and seaweed and locally grown chicken and nettles and scones and butter and heritage varieties of Scottish wheat and all these like historic recipes that we've dug up. And I'm rattling all of this off on the phone and he says, oh, right, okay, yes. He says, but not just like normal Scottish food, like fish and chips, lasagna, burgers. And it took a while for me to kind of have the headspace, I suppose, to actually consider this properly. It's because here was I with this vision of what modern Scottish food might be, and here was he with a completely different idea. And you're thinking, well, what actually is this then? You know, which of us is right here? Which of us is talking about Scottish food culture and all of its potential? And it's taken the last 10 or so years and an 80,000 word book to fully articulate this to myself and retort to my neighbour.
Someone who's been following Pam's work, her writing and the conversation she sparked about Scottish food culture is Polly Russell, a historian based at the British Library who spent years researching how and why food cultures change.
I wanted to talk to Pam, not just because she's a brilliant chef who's cooked in some of the best restaurants in the world and whose restaurant is being critically acclaimed, but because she's got this really interesting background. She studied philosophy, she's got a master's in food policy from City University, she spent time at Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. So she's got this really broad perspective on food, and she brings this together with a deeply personal account of food and food history and food culture to try and answer this question about what is modern Scottish food.
So I guess when I was growing up, Scottish food was things like what Gran made, and Gran was my great-grandmother, so my mum's grandmother. Her parents died when she was quite young in a tragic accident. It was my great-grandmother who would make potted hock, the beef shin bone, highly seasoned with pepper and allspice, bay leaf. Lemon curd always featured really heavily, and broths. And my mum grew fruit and veg in the garden. It was just what happened. You know, mum grew grow-bag tomatoes in the greenhouse, and I got used to the smell of herbal tomatoes plucked off the vine in the middle of the summer, and lettuces and radishes and all the rest. They were part of who I was, part of who my family was. And, part of, I guess, what I'm trying to do now is to adjust what people feel is normal for Scotland, for people in Scotland. Scottish food culture, it has a mixed reputation. There's this kind of juxtaposition of this amazing natural larder. We have the venison, we have the salmon, we have the whiskey and the shellfish, and then the reality of the contemporary Scots diet, which is riddled with diet-related cancers and heart disease, poor dental health, poor mental health alongside.
The future direction of any food culture can help determine the health of people and planet. And as a chef, a link between producers, farmers, retailers and eaters, Pam sees her role as pivotal.
I think chefs need to understand that their role can be anything they want them to be. And I think it is time for us to understand the magnitude of what we do. We are the nodal point, I guess, the prism of landscapes all over the planet. And in understanding that, appreciating it and giving those landscapes the care they need with the responsibility that we have an opportunity to change the world for the better. It's no smaller than that.
Chefs can also be influential storytellers, and it was in conversations with her customers that Pam began to rethink not only stories of Scottish food, but also of the landscapes surrounding the restaurant.
There were so many people who would come to Inver, to the area, and say, wow, what a beautiful unspoilt landscape. It's so great to be out here in nature. You are so lucky. And I'm kind of looking at the landscape, and no doubt it's beautiful and I love being here. But I'm seeing spruce plantations and salmon farms. So this is not a natural landscape at all. This is a very intentionally managed landscape. And the longer I went along, just kind of nodding and saying, yes, lovely, isn't it? And sort of subscribing to the Scottish Tourist Board view of what I was looking at out of the window, the more it felt like a lie. And I'm thinking, well, actually, there's quite a lot here to say, apart from just saying, yes, it's very pretty, isn't it? It's like, well, actually, maybe if we all understood what was going on in this landscape, we'd all understand ourselves a little bit better and the effect that we have on the lands around us and why it might matter.
Polly Russell.
As you can tell, Pam is a serious thinker, and not just about what Scottish food was historically, but what it's become and what it could be in the future. She's trying to figure this out, and it's an ongoing process. There's no answer, it's always being discovered. And she's still looking for answers. So we joined her on a road trip to meet the suppliers she depends on for some of the ingredients in the restaurant. It's a road trip. It took us to forests, to a loch, to the dairy heartland of the Central Belt, and into a city.
We're going to cook the venison, a saddle of venison, simply roasted, but we're going to make a very special sauce for it, which is made with...
When Derek Cooper recorded that story of Scottish food in 1981, venison was there as a key story. It's always been part of the Scottish story, and it's still there now, but it's a very different story to 1981.
In the early 1980s, the time of Derek Cooper's visit, Scotland's landscapes were undergoing dramatic change. For one, dense monocultures of spruce were being planted for timber, which, 45 years later, have become the habitat for red deer. In fact, it's home to one of the largest deer populations in Europe. So large now, there's an annual cull.
So we got up at 5 in the morning to go and meet Angus Churchill, a local gamekeeper, to go and find out what's happening with venison now.
It would have been probably the 90s when they kind of really took off, and they've just really never stopped.
Which coincides with the first wave of spruce maturing, right?
Yes, absolutely. So the trees were sort of planted 70s, 80s, and exactly like you say, they would have kind of closed canopy, and then that's when the population changed from row to red. And the trees are different. You know, this is Sitka spruce, which I think are from North America.
So any instructions, Angus, when we arrive? What do we need to be doing or not doing?
Well, I guess once we get out the vehicle, we'll sort of try and be relatively quiet, because, well, the deer's senses are incredible.
No talking?
Well, I mean, we can talk a little bit, but just quietly. Don't mind a wee bit of talking. We are in Stricker Forest, just kind of above Loch Fyne.
Pam, why have we come? How does this fit in with the story we're telling?
So deer have been a definitive part of Scottish landscape management, I guess, and Scottish landscape shaping over the last few decades. The yearly venison cull, where keepers like Angus and his dad Winston go out and shoot hundreds to thousands of deer every year and still don't scratch the surface of the population. It is a really significant part of Scottish food policy at the minute, and I believe that it's much better to be eating the venison than it is to be wasting it. And I know that everybody who comes to Inver love it. It's a perfect expression of the landscape that you see outside the window, albeit not an entirely natural, inverted commas, landscape to be looking at. It's very much a man-made situation.
Let's get moving, but what's the scenario that we're hoping for? Are they going to be in the open? How far are we going to have to walk?
We'll head up onto the open hill above the forest, because this time of day with the forest, the deer live in the forest during the daytime, I guess, resting, and then, you know, as of night they come out and feed on the hill. So we'll be catching them coming back to the forest this morning, and they should be up there feeding, so we'll go and see what we can see.
To survive, the deer have to come out. Beneath the dark canopy of densely planted spruce, there's barely any life, and so nothing for them to eat.
The red deer, they're grazers, so they'll eat everything. Roe deer are different. They are what the class as browsers, so they're more selective. They'll pick the herbs and, you see the brambles.
Oh, I noticed all the blueberries are gone.
Yeah.
We just got 2.
All right. A little morsel.
Wild blueberries in the shrubs. Polly and I just had a couple for breakfast.
On this particular morning, we missed the deer. Storm Floris had landed on the west coast of Scotland and, as Angus explained, the red and the roe were probably still sheltering. But the 3-mile walk around the spruce gave Pam and Polly time to reflect on this new Scottish landscape and the potential Scottish diet it was making possible.
I think what this has really brought home to me, walking here with you, is the way in which deer, venison is so associated with sort of an idea of Scottish food, of sort of traditional Scottish food, as though that's been forever. And of course it is native. It's also very recent. It's a very modern sort of part of the diet as well. So that it kind of really fits into your idea of the modern Scottish.
Given the climate crisis being what it is and the enormous role that food supply has to play in that, like up to about 30% of emissions are attributed to how we grow and distribute food. Having such a wild resource as venison here that is feeding itself, it's turning hillsides that we can't eat into something that we can, and that is delicious and very nutritious and healthful. It's a responsible use of the resources we have at hand to eat venison.
In Derek's programme, another wild and precious food of the Scottish larder was salmon, which is no longer the case. In many of Europe's rivers, wild Atlantic salmon is on the brink of extinction. And yet, in the 1980s, an industry was being developed that would eventually make a farmed breed of salmon ubiquitous. With that industry on the west coast came a new source of protein, but also controversy over marine pollution, use of chemicals, and concerns over parasites with knock-on effects on biodiversity.
What Pam's been wondering is whether there's an alternative. And so she's been working with a supplier who for many decades has been involved in aquaculture and is also experimenting with new ways of producing farmed fish.
So here we are, we're looking out on Loch Fyne. We're due west from Glasgow. If you keep going, you get to New York, sort of thing. The Atlantic Ocean is just on the other side of that hill there.
This is Alistair Barge. 55 years ago, his family diversified away from sheep farming and into aquaculture, experimenting first with trout and then a land-based salmon system. 35 years ago, the focus switched again, this time to a larger and meatier fish species, halibut. Along the loch are a series of buildings housing a halibut nursery. First in containers and then in large circular pools, Alistair and his team grow the fish from egg to larvae to juvenile and onto adults. A process that takes 7 to 8 years, all on land. This is real innovation in a modern Scottish landscape.
You're seeing Irene and Kate grading very small halibut, and each of these halibut is a bit bigger than your thumbnail, 1 gram fish. In the wild you may see a 200 kilo halibut. It starts life very early on as a pelagic fish, and then the head twists and it becomes a flatfish. So these ones have made that metamorphosis, so they've changed into their flatfish now. They say it's more like a meat eater's fish because it's quite firm, and the chefs like a firm fish to work with.
It's very delicious, and the texture is very satisfying. It's great, like raw or very lightly cured, as well as roasted in a pan. And we've done things with everything, every part of it, from the roes to the liver to the skin to the head to the tail to the fat, as well as the fillet. So there's a lot of potential in it. Actually, as we've moved around these different environments today, what's really struck me is how there really is no line between what is natural and what is man-made anymore. And it's not easy to sort of draw lines in the sand and say, well, this is what I find acceptable and this is what isn't, because scale is one of the considerations there. It's like, at what point does this halibut hatchery and this halibut farm get to before I find it unacceptable? And it's like, well, actually, in theory, if they adhere to the practices as they're doing it now, it remains a kind of clean, sustainable operation that cares about its people, that is a meaningful part of this community. Why would you start objecting just because they did 20,000 tonnes or 20, rather than 2? Like, there's no inherent objection there. It's just that, unfortunately, the way things have been managed in the past is that the bigger the scale, the less consideration given to the human, the animal, the environment, the diversity, the other people who are sharing, people and creatures who are sharing the landscape.
From a relatively new and growing feature of the Scottish landscape, the road trip took Pam and Polly to a shrinking one, and with it came a story of food, community and connection.
When Derek Cooper recorded that list of typically Scottish food, much of Scotland's food production would have been produced by small-scale family farms. Well, that's changed, and so has the landscape changed. But Pam has a very close relationship with a small family-run farm just up the hill from Alistair's, in fact, run by Fiona, his wife.
So since the very early days of Edinburgh, we were originally buying cheese from Fee. She is an excellent cheesemaker. She's won award-winning cheeses. But now there's too many grandchildren who get first dibs on the milk, I think.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Since then, Fiona and Alistair's 3 children have returned to the farm and are all doing different things. And Finn in particular has been starting to raise animals, lamb, beef, and potentially some slow-grown chickens, of which we have had a few.
When I first came here, the farmers all helped each other and had lunch together when they were gathering or clipping, and gradually that changed. Because it had to change, because there was no money and people had to make enough money to live. And so, in a way, we sort of want to go backwards a little bit, not in every direction, but you have to be lucky to be able to do that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, and the idea of going backwards, I'm wary of. I think we're trying to present ways of thinking about the future of food systems and where something like this can fit into it, and it's this idea of thinking of what is typically Scottish, what makes us uniquely Scottish, and a lot of that is about supporting each other and genuinely caring about community, which you see in all sorts of situations all over Scotland.
Hi boy, Rubble, Rubble.
Just explain who Rubble is.
So Rubble is the 2-month-old Dexter Jersey calf who we first met when he was an hour old a couple of months ago. Donald John, the 2-year-old Dexter cow, is ready for slaughter, I guess, and we will be seeing some of Donald John in the Edinburgh kitchen in a few weeks.
Our food production is part of the whole way of life here. We have to have lots of different little enterprises, all helping each other, and some more than others, but it's all part of the mix.
For me, it's just a really, really important part of what we're doing at Edinburgh, which is about making a life in a community. Like, it's about the people here as much as it is about the theory of a landscape and alternative economics. And the disconnect to food supply is what's been blamed for a lot of dietary ill health, and it's reconnecting people to food supply. The Scottish Government has stated it as an aim of their food policy. We're talking about a very small scale thing, and a family choosing how to live and how to feed themselves and contribute to the community around them. Like, this isn't a model that can in itself feed the world, because we can't all have a handful of cows and micro enterprises in our piece of land. Like, that's not what we're suggesting. But it's I think the biggest point for me is that there are many, many different landscapes that all fit together like a kind of collage, and that there are always competing priorities to just profit. It's like, even I know as a chef and a business owner, there are easier ways to make money out of Edinburgh restaurant than the way we're going about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly the same with the spa.
We went from Fiona's to visit another family-run business, but on a completely different scale.
So we're at Graham's dairy farm. So Graham's are, I think, the most immediately recognisable brand of Scottish dairy. You would certainly, anybody in Scotland would recognise it from the supermarkets. And we use it in the restaurant. We have done for years. I guess they operate on a much bigger scale than some of the things we've been talking about so far. We are surrounded by the beautiful Jersey cows with their big eyeliner eyes, and behind us I think you can hear a gentle kind of hissing from the robot milking machines.
I'm Carol Graham, I'm one of the family. Right now we're in Kippen at our family Jersey herd. We've got 300 milking cows here. This is a very modern setup. It's just been over 2 years. So we have robots for the cows to ensure that when they're milked, they're the most comfortable they can be. They're not put under any stress.
Hi, I'm Leanne Bertram. I am the fire manager here for the Jersey herd. We operate on 4 robotic milking systems, which gives the cows free access to milk at any point, which is different to a conventional milking system where cows would be sort of collected and milked all at the same time. These guys decide when they want to be milked, so it's much more natural. They never have to carry an excessive amount of milk. They know that they can attend at their sort of chosen time to get milked. As a result of that, they're more productive.
Have you been here before, Pam?
I've never visited Graham's before, no.
And why did you want to come yourself?
Because it's such a significant part of Scottish food culture, and it's a landscape I drive through. Like I grew up in the east coast of Scotland. Our restaurant is in the west, and right now we're right in the middle of the country. I know the landscape that this milk comes from. I know that they are a family farm and that they do share values, but also some of it is the very pragmatic reason that they are one of the biggest, most accessible brands, and therefore I can get hold of it. You know, we are running a rural restaurant, and these constraints also come into play.
And in your book, Pam, you talk quite a lot about milk products and their place in Scottish food culture.
Yeah, we are a dairy culture.
Expand.
Yeah. I think the Scottish dairy industry has not only defined a lot of what Scotland tastes like. There's a lot of chat about Inuit people having 100 different names for snow. Well, I think in Scotland there's about 50 odd more names for different milk products, from Oon to Bladdock and all the rest. It's not just that the dairy has been so present and the cheese making and all the subsidiary things like that. The dairy industry actually gave rise to the bacon sandwich, because it was as a result of the expanding dairy industry in the early 1900s, and because the excess of whey produced, that dairy farming also started with small herds of pigs to eat the whey, which would have happened in microcosm on like Crofts family farms, small holdings of all kinds anyway. But then, because there was so much whey, there was then so much pigs, and then there was very little, there was no refrigeration, so we ended up with a lot of salted ham products, and therefore we were all eating bacon rolls for breakfast. So the iconic bacon roll also comes from the dairy industry.
There's a laser and camera in front of the cow's udder, which switches on and directs each individual cut onto the teat of the cow.
And all the cow needs to do is walk in.
Yep, the gates open and close, and there's cameras set up so the robot knows if the cow's
This is part of the food culture that everyone in Scotland will access. Like if you drink milk, you're going to be drinking Graham's at some point. You know, I think it's a really important thing to acknowledge. I talk a lot about craft and skill and small scale and all of these things, but we intersect with people on all different levels. And like a lot of the storytelling around food cultures is just what you choose to acknowledge and what you don't. And I think it's really important, if we're going to create a food culture that works for everybody, to acknowledge that everybody has a role to play, and that you can still do things well with craft, skill, care, equity as core values on all sorts of different scales.
Pam's idea of what is modern Scottish food is not just about local native ingredients, what you might think of as the typical larder. It's much more expansive than that. She's interested in long histories of trade and travel and exchange, and the ingredients that those experiences have brought with them from around the world. So a few miles up the road is the most extraordinary garden which supplies Inver restaurant, run by a woman called Kate, which is literally bursting with varieties of herbs, vegetables, salads, fruits from around the world.
That's our house. It's a croft. My parents bought it in 1980. So you've just walked from what was the field into the garden. And my mum passed away in 2007 when we took over. There was only sheep and grass when we started.
Over the course of 20 years, what Kate and her husband Russell have created is something extraordinary and immersive. Step into this landscape and you're inside a food forest in the west of Scotland, made up of edible plants that spread across the ground, reach inside a polytunnel and also an orchard.
We have worked closely with Kate and Russ since the very, very beginning of Inver. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say they have shaped the character of the food and the menus just as much as anybody else, including me.
A lot of the things that we grow, we have grown mainly for Inver, like some of the weirder and more wonderful things, so that they can put their... Such as rat's tail radish seed pods. So you know how usually you sow radishes because you want to get a radish? Well, this one you don't ever harvest the radish. What you want is a seed pod. This is what it goes like a bit later.
It's so mustardy.
Yeah.
Fiery.
Not bad.
Really strong.
This is an amazing thing that Inver might get some of. For the first time ever, this is actually fruiting, and it's only ever made 5 fruits. But now it's utterly laden with them. A miniature kiwi. So it doesn't grow any bigger than that. It will ripen up, and it's smooth skinned, so you can just pop it in your mouth and eat it. It's just gorgeous. This is another amazing berry from Chile. It's called kapow. Kapow.
Great name.
Yeah, because it goes kapow in your mouth. It's like a burst of sweet and sour and cinnamon.
It's kind of like strawberry Haribo, kind of, with spices and things in the background.
You'd been a gardener and food grower before?
It's a nurse.
No, I'm a nurse. An operating theatre scrub nurse. Up until 2 years ago, I was working 3 days a week. So we were managing to do this on just 4 days a week. But now I'm full-time here.
Okay, a lot of these ingredients are being served at tables in a Scottish restaurant. We're surrounded by Scottish food.
Yes, even though the seeds came from Korea. Yeah.
Or Chile. Or where did the kiwis come from?
Turkeys from the figs from Turkey, isn't it? This is Scottish now because it's growing here.
For the next part of our road trip, we left the immediate landscape and environment of Inver and we visited Glasgow. And we visited Glasgow to explore the story of chocolate and sugar.
But yeah, this is where everything happens, very noisy as you can hear. But this is where the roasting and the winnowing and grinding happens. So
in 1981, Derek Cooper's conversations with Scottish producers couldn't have included a bean-to-bar chocolate producer at the back of Merchant Street in Glasgow. Cocoa beans and sugar were commodities, and chocolate making mostly carried out on an industrial scale. Today, in a small workshop, Lara and Cameron Dixon of Bare Bones are working closely with growers in Africa, Asia and the Americas to produce award-winning chocolate. To Pam, this represents craft, quality and a rare and transparent supply chain to farmers growing the beans. An important shift, she believes, in Scotland's relationship with sweet things.
I mean, sugar shaped Scotland. It was the money from sugar cane plantations abroad owned by often Scottish people themselves who went out there as part of empire and took over lands overseas and the people that went with them enslaved the people that were already on those lands, and took the profit from that back to build Glasgow in particular. There was a point in the British Empire where Glasgow was the second city, which is remarkable, and that's where we are today, is in Glasgow at the other end of that 500 years. The Scottish landscape doesn't end in Kelso or Hadrian's Wall. We have landscapes all over Africa, Asia, South America, who are feeding into, literally, our own diet here. And the relationships that Scotland has with these countries, I want to be representative to who I think Scotland and Scottish people are. The kind of people who have everyone at the table. And, you wouldn't sit around a table with someone and then turn around and exploit them, expect them to live on the breadline, be unable to afford healthcare, and if we extend that even further, future landscapes, what are they going to look like, and how responsible are we for them today?
So where do you source from?
So at the moment from Madagascar, Honduras, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Philippines and Vietnam as well.
The connection with landscapes far away, as in the Philippines or elsewhere through the bare bones chocolate supply chain. It's talking to Lara, it's almost like I feel connected to these farmers now in a much deeper way, which feels like an incredible privilege. It feels like connection is really a luxury ingredient these days. It's not something you can take for granted.
The last visit on our road trip was to Aladdin's, a really well-stocked Middle Eastern grocery shop located in the middle of Glasgow. What I think Aladdin's represents to Pam is a long story of Scotland's connection with the rest of the world, of spices that have been traded and travelled, ingredients, and have influenced foods, and also about the rich and diverse communities that have always made up Scotland and make up Scotland today.
We're here at Aladdin's in just over the river, south side of Glasgow in the Gorbals, and it's one of my favourite places to shop in the city. It's a Middle Eastern supermarket, a lot of Iranian produce. There are these in any high street in big cities, shops, bakeries, delis from different communities, immigrant communities. There's been immigrant communities in Scotland forever. In fact, we wouldn't have a Scottish population were it not for immigration. It really just depends how far back you want to go as to who we're talking about.
And you just sort of said, like, almost every city, every town will probably have a shop like this.
It's just the joy to use different stuff. Like, I love these flavours. I love the depth of understanding it gives you about food and cooking itself, to take a new flavour and a new ingredient and try and incorporate it into things that you're using already. I have a chicken, which is from a farm not far from Glasgow, St Bride's, and it's served with yoghurt and Iranian black lime and nettle. And it came about just purely because it was springtime, I had nettles, and I was looking for something that would give a bit of lift and elevation to the very kind of deep mineral earthiness of a nettle. And in Iran they serve black lime with chicken and yoghurt, quite classically, and I'd just been to Aladdin's and I had the packet of black lime and I thought, brilliant, this really works. And why not, The Scottish landscape has been extended abroad for centuries. We've been trading abroad for at least 500 documented years, far, far, far longer if we want to go back. All the classic Scottish foods and flavours come from somewhere else. Haggis, neeps and tatties being an absolutely brilliant example, in that potatoes come from Peru. The spices, the classic Scottish charcuterie spices, allspice, aka Jamaica pepper and black pepper, come from the Western Ghats of India and the West Indies. None of these things were indigenous to Scotland. We've made them our own over centuries. So, who is to say right now which of these flavours will become better entrenched in Scottish food in the future? And the kind of process that we're going through now is the kind of process that determines that.
All food cultures are created, and all are amalgamations. They're constructed from ecosystems we depend on, whether forests, fields, coastlines or lochs, and also the global influences that have ebbed and flowed for millennia through trade, conquest and migration. And the question we started the programme with, the one posed by Pam and Polly, what is modern food? That can be applied to all food cultures, all food traditions, whatever that means.
You told us this brilliant story about being asked, are you serving normal Scottish food? And you talking about serving modern Scottish food. And you asked this question, which is right? And where do you land with that? Which is right?
I think the thing is they both exist in tandem, so that it's because of this idea of normal Scottish food that we need to move on. Really, there's great value in fish and chips, sure, and the occasional burger, and of course we value food like lasagna and all the other creations that have been brought to the country and normalised. They've defined what Scotland feels and tastes like. But the point is this process is ongoing. So now the communities that are with us are from different parts of the globe, and there are different foods that are being normalised. And that's the process that I want to be part of. For me, this is a typically Scottish way of being. We have always benefited from the intellectual stimulation and the changes to food culture that connection brings.
And I think what you're doing is also making this point that tradition is never set in stone, it changes. So what is normal Scottish and what is modern Scottish are in conversation and can change in all sorts of ways that could be very positive for people, the planet, communities.
Yeah. I mean, change is the only constant. It's the question remaining is what do we want things to change to?